Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Today, on this Tuesday afternoon, I'm joined by Lawrence Conley and Liam Carrigan. Liam all the way from Japan and Lawrence from the Skylark. Yes, that will soon be entering the Hall of Fame, Lawrence. The amount of people that asked me about the Skylark. I know we spoke about this last week, and when we picked up our trophy last week, I dedicated it to the one and only Gary Manny Mountfield. But I'm going to throw this over to you, Lawrence, because you were at our sold-out event in Glasgow back in August. You had an opportunity to meet the man, an absolutely legendary figure who loved Celtic. I mean, he's not one of these guys that attaches himself to the club. You know, somebody puts a scarf around the neck. This guy knew his history. He loved the hoops, didn't he, Manny?
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, I'd heard that from a friend, Craig McGee, who'd put on one of his tours, one of his music tours, about getting drunk with him, and it was Manny that started the Celtic songs, not Craig. So, yeah, but absolute gentleman, and what a raconteur, man. He held that audience spellbound, didn't he?
Oh, he was incredible.
For a speaker, it was. Yeah, you could have called that his calling, couldn't you? Because he was so good at it. It was absolutely outstanding. And guy never forgot his cell. I know he maybe put a wee bit of pressure on you, but with the autograph hunters outside before a gig, telling me make sure they get in.
There was only 20 of them, Lawrence. It's fine. It was sold out. There was only 20 of them.
But it shows, he's kind of not forgot. He didn't forget himself, did he? He's like, look, make sure these fans get in.
That was
Look
right.
after them. Yeah. Great guy, but very sad to hear of he's kind of untimely passing. I know he hadn't been well. But also I don't know if it was influenced by that gig at Bad, but I know he booked a speaking tour. He was going to go on a speaking tour because he really seemed to enjoy it, didn't he? He was in his element.
He did. And you're right, there was a massive tour. We'll never be able to see him live on stage again, and I'm thankful that we did in August with a Celtic State of Mind. So thanks everybody who got involved in that. And as we say, sometimes football and music intertwine. That's what happens. Over in Japan, Liam Carrigan, I'm sure you've got a lot to say. We're going to be talking about entering a new era, because that's often what happens with a new managerial appointment, not an interim appointment, a new managerial appointment, entering a new era. And in order to do that, I think also you need to have big changes throughout the football club, Liam. And that, particularly at this moment in time, means big changes in the boardroom. So, I mean, people were beside themselves thinking that Dermot Desmond had spoken. Dermot has not spoken. The Daily Record pulled out an old interview, which I think he gave for the Celtic Opus way back about 20 years ago. And they've pulled out quotes. Now, it's interesting insofar is that his attitude's not changed very much, has it, Liam, since back then?
No, and the fact that the most up-to-date quotes that they could get from him are from 17 years ago. It tells you that this is a guy who openly says he hates journalists and sees them as a pest. Now, I wrote a little bit about this yesterday on the blog. I am never usually one to give Rangers any praise, as you know, right? But compare what they've done in the last 3 days with what the Celtic board have done, and it's a PR masterclass, right? Quietly put the figures out while everybody's going on about the Celtic AGM meltdown, and then the next business day, bag the two guys who are responsible for it. That's how a proper company should be run. I mean, whoever. It's. I mean, no one would even consider it now because of the power that Dermot Desmond has. But if you watch back that AGM, the utter mess it was. Like, Ross Desmond should never be allowed anywhere near an AGM again. That's obvious. Michael Nicholson should go for not having a spine. Peter Lawwell should go for having the sheer contempt for the fans to call that to a close and to then authorise a statement claiming that it was only 30 or 40 disruptors that caused the problem, when it was clear. In the same story, they talked about it, the event was attended by 900 people. I'll be generous and say at least half of them in that room were given the board dogs abuse. So it's at least 10 times what Celtic claim it was.
Well, there's a lot in that, Liam, and a lot that we really have got to unpick. So the AGM, this is something that's going to continue to roll on, because this season so far, we like trebles, but I didn't expect to see a treble of statements. The first one coming, of course, I think it was a late night statement that came in, and there was no undersigned. Nobody put their name to it. Obviously, the club were questioned about it when we met up with them a few months ago now, and they felt it was okay. It just didn't land with a few fans. This, if an indication was required, Liam, that they didn't know or identify with the Celtic support, that was it. The second statement was from Dermot Desmond himself upon the departure of Brendan Rodgers, and then the third one was pre-prepared and read out by Ross Desmond. Now, something that Liam says there, Lawrence, I'm going to throw over to you, because Liam's right. Ross Desmond should not be in a position where he can more or less take over the AGM and address the rest of the shareholders. He is, of course, there representing his father, who is on the board and who is a shareholder. But the way in which that played out was just typical of Celtic at the moment, whereby we'll do what we want. But one thing I would say is, unfortunately for Liam and many others, myself included, we will see him again at an AGM. We will see Ross Desmond at an AGM, and we actually might see him on the board of directors, Lawrence, because the way that the club views the fan base, in our opinion, is with contempt.
So I think we will see him again. Apparently he's one of Desmond's children that takes the most interest in Celtic. I saw Quirrell put in the group, it's not unusual for shareholders or their proxies to address a meeting. What certainly was lacking was communication from the board as to why he was sitting where he was and why he was addressing. Right, I get we all know he's Dermot's son, but just a bit of courtesy and say, look, this is why we are allowing Ross Desmond to speak. He's represented his father, who's not here. Something like that would be I think would have been in order. Just explain what's going on. The statement itself, it's not any better than the previous ones that have been released, so it didn't land well. Listen, I've spoke to some people that's been at the AGM. I know Liam saying, they thought it was at least half. Some people are split, saying, look, they felt there was a group of people there that were going to shout over the board no matter what, and continue. Whether they're entitled to do that, and I know Jeanette said like any competent chair should be able to handle it. Who knows? But to an extent, it probably played into the board's hands. Giving them excuse, saying like, we've adjourned the meeting, we've called for order, we're not getting any, we'll just close it. The smarter move might have been to take them into question and answer, and get somebody with some gravitas to answer some probing questions to them, to put them on the spot to answer. Just now, they're going to take the questions via email, and they'll have the prepared answers coming out. I'm not saying that some of the answers wouldn't have been prepared, because they could preempt some of the questions that were going to come up, like what happened with the recruitment, why weren't deals getting done. But you're more likely to catch them on a hop if you're asking this in a live environment rather via email. So, for a club that's, I think, had certainly this century absolute domestic dominance, the only time we've had any challenge, the other clubs been proven to be cheating, but we seem to be able to not be able to build on that in terms of Europe. In this setup, we take a swing and miss, the whole club's in jeopardy. Nobody's suggesting that. We're saying, like, maybe not be as risk averse, just a wee bit more investment. We're not saying, you've got 70 million, spend 70 of it. We're saying maybe if you'd spent 30 of it, we might have some strikers and a right winger.
Right, I'm going to flip the first
crazy and spend everything on. Do you know what? Spend the 70 and borrow another 50.
I'm going to focus on the first part, Lawrence. I'm going to flip it slightly, because you're talking there about opportunity lost. When there's a prepared statement, and that prepared statement is attacking Celtic fans, when you consider that maybe the approach of certain individuals has affected it, it's not. They were going to read that statement out anyway. So, as I said yesterday, the fans, the shareholders could have been doing a huddle, singing, a love song to the board as they approached. It wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference, because Ross Desmond already had a pre-prepared statement from Daddy.
Well, I'm not saying he wouldn't have read it out.
Yeah.
I'm saying, if we'd let him finish, we might have got to a live question and answer, rather than the meeting being called to a halt.
But, I honestly think, though, that's weak leadership from Peter Lawwell. I think that's weak, right? So you come into the room, we're in a situation where there's a fan movement. You need to be prepared for that. Now, no one got assaulted. no one got personally attacked. There was boos, there was red cards, and there was sack the board chants. Nothing different from a match day, right? So deal with it, is my take on this, Lawrence. I'm going to ask Liam, right? But I honestly think, Peter Lawwell, grow a set. This club's been very good for you. You keep telling us that you've been very good for us. The club's been very good for him. Deal with 2 or 3 minutes of being uncomfortable, because there's only one reason why you're uncomfortable. That's because the club has failed. So take it. You've got to take that on the chin. Don't adjourn the meeting. Don't end it early. See it through to the end. I used, Lawrence, the Terry Cassidy example. No.
Oh, you remember?
He took it. Shettleston Halls. 300 Celtic supporters. The club teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and he sat and he took every single question, and he sat till the end, and he didn't have to be there. Wasn't it an AGM?
Yep,
the fans asked him to be there. Yeah.
Shettleston Halls, yeah. You know, so, bit of a rougher environment as well. So,
and it was Terry that employed Peter Lawwell for the first time, by the way, at Celtic.
Came from Clydeporт, yeah.
Right. So I disagree with you, mate. I think that, listen, you can view...
Not like us to disagree, mate.
That's all right. It's just that the old referee used to be Natasha, but she's left us with Liam. So Liam's going to have to referee her, right?
Liam in a lunch. How can I be a referee? Come on.
so Lawrence and I have got...
You have to be at the lunch in Japan as well. I thought it was just Scotland.
We've got differing views, Liam. Where are you on this one? Because I do think that if you're the chairman of a football club and you've got someone sitting at the table who has just drawn 900 grand out the football club as a CEO, there's somebody strong enough, surely, at that table who can manage that meeting.
Well, excuse me while I just get comfortable on this fence that I'm sitting on here. But I think you've both got a point to differing degrees, right? Lawrence is right that the board had it made easy for them by the nature of the protest, right? But they knew exactly what they were doing with that statement from Ross Desmond, right? I mean, I would hope at the very least somebody else on the board had a look at it before they let him read it out, you know, and you could see that that's just that's just throwing petrol on the bonfire with that, right? And there were easy ways to diffuse that situation if the board had chosen to. One, accept what Jeanette Finley's perfectly legitimate motion to move to the next piece of business request. You know, they could easily have done that. Nobody in the room, I don't think anyone in the room wants to sit and watch that AI generated PR video slop that they were going to put on YouTube a couple of hours later anyway. Right? We're not there for that. We're there for accountability. We're there to ask questions and get answers. So you have that. That's one. They could easily have done that. Two, when Lawwell calls the adjournment, just to let everybody calm down, again, I don't think that's the right course of action, but I can at least see the rationale behind it. But then he comes out and says, right, the meeting's going to finish at 12:30 regardless. Again, throwing petrol on the bonfire, mate. You know, you've got people who are wound up, want to ask their questions, and not only are you going to make them sit through this video that nobody wants to watch, you're going to let Nepo Baby and Chief give a speech that nobody wants to hear. You're not even going to allow extra time for questions at the end of it. It's just... Yes, the fan protest maybe gave them an easy out, but I think they were angling to get that anyway, regardless. They used people talk about triggers, right? Maybe that's a modern way of putting it. You know, watch it for someone's triggers. Don't say something that's going to set them off, right? The board knew exactly what the triggers were of everybody in that room on Friday, and they made sure they hit every single one of them.
Yeah,
it was needlessly antagonistic.
Well, see, on that point, Liam, talking about trigger points and pushing buttons and that kind of thing, I think what's important now moving on is knowing what works with this board, knowing what works with the individuals who are at the helm, if you like, and then adapting your approach and adapting your style. Because I'm not completely disagreeing with Lawrence. I mean, I'm not 100% on board with what he's saying. I do think that the club had to deal with that better. But you see that live and in technical, and personally, I would look at that and say, how can I do this better next time? How can I deal with this group of individuals better next time? It's billionaires. It's billionaires' sons. It's people who are drawing 900 grand last year at the football club, and in Peter Lawwell's case, over a period of time, millions of pounds out the football club. And you ask yourself, and by the way, yes, they were working, of course they were, but you know, and they have to be paid for their work. I'm not saying that, but they have been rewarded incredibly by Celtic, and all we hear is how well we are rewarded as fans because of their hard work. So now it's a case for me, looking at the way that they react to certain situations and saying, right, how do we approach it now? Because there has to be a what next. There absolutely has to be a what next. I'm going to be bringing in as many comments as possible because we're three Celtic fans with three differing views. Lawrence and I disagree from time to time. It's not a setup. He doesn't know what I'm going to say. It isn't scripted like certain Celtic TV interviews. We just go for it. And if I agree with Lawrence, I agree with him. But on this occasion, I don't. Quinny's in the chat. Have a wee chat with Quinny in the chat whilst we run through the other comments. Joe Hamilton Songs, Afternoon Troops. I still cannot believe how we are all being treated by these establishment goons. There was wording, talking about triggering there that Liam brought up. There was wording in that pre-prepared statement, if you could get past the paper shaking noise at the mic, because he was quite nervous. There was a word or several words that I think were triggering Lawrence. One of them was anti-establishment. Does Ross and Dermot know their history? I mean, anti-establishment and saying that you're surprised that there is factions or elements of the Celtic support that are anti-establishment. Of course we are.
I was kind of, you know, Ross's performance in itself, see that kind of wee pleading look to Peter Lawwell.
Oh,
He didn't come across as a confident speaker. Didn't seem to be able to command the crowd, and he's kind of, Peter, help me. You know, you're like, mate, if you're going to, you know, and let's be honest, unless somebody comes in and buys Dermot out, Ross is going to have something to do with running the football club. You'd want him to be a bit stronger, wouldn't you, in himself, be a bit more commanding in himself. And I get it's daunting having a group of people speaking at you, or shouting at you, and you know, I'm pretty sure the stewards at Celtic Park and £12.34 an hour or whatever feel that as well, but they seem to get by with it every game. I just thought it was really poor performance by him in particular because he wasn't able to kind of defend himself or speak up or call for order himself. You know, he had to kind of look to Peter and go, "You're going to help me."
What about Celtic fans being targeted? Now, I think this is relevant. I think that this needs to be said, right? So you've got Ross Desmond there, who's lived a life that you and I will never understand in terms of entitlement, being born with a silver cutlery set, never mind a spoon in his mouth, right? So he walks into a room and he's unhappy with the tone. He's unhappy with red cards. He's unhappy with sat at the board. Right, that's fine. Let's look at the treatment of Celtic fans then for a moment. Fairhurst inquiry. Why did that happen? Because of the police treatment of Celtic supporters making their way to a football game. What about when Celtic supporters are attacked at Ibrox with bottles and other receptacles to the point where we've had to have things netted off? We've had to have the section of the ground netted off, and for a spell we didn't even take tickets because of the safety issues. Did Celtic step up and protect the fans back then? Because that was real attacks. That wasn't just haughty words, Liam. I mean, this was Celtic fans and supporters under attack by the establishment.
And staff members as well. Remember, staff members were scarred.
Staff members, physiotherapists,
you know,
stitches in the head.
Because I know we're speaking about the safety group, and listen, maybe they have called Celtic, and maybe Celtic's called the meeting. I don't know who's called it, but there was people actually getting scarred in it for life, and there didn't seem to be as much action getting taken. They didn't see sections of Ibrox getting season books off them and barred. But perhaps Celtic and Safeco kind of deal with these things differently.
I'm talking about the Celtic board standing up for the Celtic fans, though.
Oh,
that was real attacks.
Yeah.
That wasn't just sack the board and a couple of red cards. That was real physical attacks.
There's a number of things you expect to see them, the board stand up and they don't do particularly well. That's one of them. On the players, you know, the number of players attacked on the part you don't think they've stood up for well. And even in, you know, I know they say that they deal with things behind closed doors. There's another penalty which they had against St Mirren on Maeda. No comment from the club. Following on from two which they had against Rangers, no comment from the club.
Yep.
So how much did they really you know, the last person to stand up what was Lenny when he came out and having to make statements?
And Brendan Rodgers after the game at Tynecastle, the 2-0 game at Tynecastle, he stood up for the club, right?
I mean, we talk about the need for somebody to continually. It doesn't seem to be the CEO, does it? He doesn't. I know he had that interview with Jerry, but it's not really standing up for the club and speaking out, is it?
No. Miles off it. That's prepared. That's a situation, Lawrence, where I'm handing you the questions to ask me, and I've got a prepared answer.
Listen, you laugh at Rangers because of the amount of statements they issue, but at some point you're kind of going, geez, we could be doing with one standing up for us, and especially in respect to VAR. You look at that game at Hampden, the narrative is they were had done by. In reality, they get one debatable decision they think was a red, it's a yellow, the panels agreed it's a yellow, versus 5 decisions that could have went for us that we didn't get. You're like, where's the balance here? So I don't think they do it particularly well. Maybe they do it behind closed doors.
They can't do it behind closed doors. They need to step up and stand up for the football club and that football club's fans. And
remember when John Reid was doing it? When John Reid done it, great. The lawyer that stepped up into an SFA to the task, Fergus, the Doogie Gate, which there may be another Doogie Gate, funnily enough. I think Livingston have uncovered kind of different messages recently about a penalty incident. But there doesn't seem to be any kind of figurehead at the club that's willing, because it shouldn't be the manager's job. Listen, it shouldn't be Dermot or Lenny's job. Brendan or Lenny's job when they're the manager. There should be a figurehead that does this, stands up to the fans for a club and is willing to point out and say, look, this narrative's wrong on the VAR. There's 5 decisions that could have went for us and 1 the other way. And it's something the club definitely lacks. And I don't know if we'll keep Martin on and maybe make him the figurehead to stand up.
But the point I'm making, VAR and refereeing decisions is one thing, Lawrence, but I'm talking about stepping up and standing up for the Celtic support, who have been attacked over a period of time, both physically, like some of the examples were given, but also with regards to our meek response to the kettling of Celtic supporters going to a Rangers game. We need the club to step up, because you can't be saying, right, there's a faction of the support who are anti-establishment, therefore they're not our type of people. You need to step up and stand up for the Celtic support. This is a Celtic support that after Seville won 2 international awards for being the best supported, the best supporters. We got one from FIFA and we got one from UEFA. The club lauded it back then. They lauded it back then.
That Kirtland on London Road, and I think the temporary powers the police put into play for that day, there's some doubt on the legality of them,
right?
Whether or not it should have been in play. And you'd think the club lawyers would be all over it, saying, look, we'll sort this out for you, rather than leaving it to the fan groups themselves to sort out. Right. Saying, look, I remember Marcus' statement, maybe it's just Celtic under the old board. Remember when he gets sent off at that game? The club weren't going to get him a lawyer, and he wasn't. And Souness offered to get him a lawyer, and he wasn't until he told Celtic that, by the way, Rangers are going to pay for my lawyer.
But this is the thing.
And then that's when Celtic stepped up and got my lawyer.
38 years ago, that you're talking about an incident 38 years ago where Celtic were willing to put Frank McAvenny up to court and be represented by Jimmy Farrell, who was on the Celtic board at the time. Jim Craig's father-in-law, who thought Frank's name was Patrick. That's how on board he was. That's how in touch he was with the situation. So that shows you a rickety old board with not a clue and not a pot to do the proverbial in. You fast forward 38 years, Lawrence, and all we bang the drum about is how stable we are financially, how we've got all this expertise behind the scenes when it comes to legalities. We've got lawyers, we've got accountants. I'm the contracts guy, and he's the finance guy. We're banging the drum constantly, but when it comes down to it, when you need these specialities to step up and stand up for the Celtic support, they have failed time and time again. So for that support, right, to sing a song at an AGM and raise a few red cards to then get shut down by the people who have not been protecting them for a number of years is completely unacceptable, Lawrence. It's completely unacceptable.
Look, listen, I don't think that the meeting should have been shut down, but I agree with Liam that the behaviour gave Peter Lawwell an easy out. I've called in a job.
What were they expecting? A Christmas carol? What were they expecting, Lawrence? Come on.
Listen, that's the thing. Game of Thrones, what we're expecting and what were the fans expecting? So if after the warnings for ordering that and knowing that the Celtic board would take an easy out, why would you give them it?
Because I honestly don't think anybody expected them to walk out. I mean, I didn't think they had Kutzbah before, but now, you know, they are eunuchs as far as I'm concerned. But again, Liam, jump in. You're meant to be the guy with the cards. Jump in and let us know your thoughts here. Have the board stood up for the Celtic support enough, right? This is a Celtic board of directors who are well paid for the job in which they underperform. They get their club suit. Even if you're not on the board, you get one, Ross. And you can't stand up and you can't step up for the Celtic support. Are you fit for purpose?
No. And a word, no. The thing is, it's not just about not defending the support. It's about actively harming the support at this point. I wrote on the eve of the AGM, a fan had his door kicked in by Police Scotland.
Yep.
Allegedly, I say allegedly, on the back of information given to him by the club. Kicked this boy's door in, stole the boy's phone, so the boy's father's phone and tablet, which are his only means of communication, and his father has a life-threatening condition that might flare up at any moment. And they kick his door in, drag the boy away, and leave the dad sitting there freezing with the door kicked in. And for what? To charge him with breach of the peace. Meanwhile, just over a week previously, one of the Union Bears knocks out a guy in public, completely unarmed, unprovoked, while under a police escort. The police are literally standing 50 feet away and nothing is done. So we have two tiers of policing going on here, and the Celtic board are complicit in it.
Well, the individual that you mentioned spoke last night at the Celtic Collective meeting, just to give a sense of the way in which Celtic fans are treated or mistreated. And when you talk about establishment and being anti-establishment, there's one example in the modern day of why certain individuals are anti-establishment. Let us know your thoughts. Lawrence and I are fencing at the moment. Let us know who you agree with.
On the ultras, and I think, you know, the establishment's definitely going to go for the ultras for both sides. You saw that Union Bear guy getting jailed for 2 years for the disturbance in the city centre recently. You know, kicking a door in for a breach of peace. You know, they'd expect that for maybe an attempted murder charge, GBH, or kind of drug dealing charge, something like that. But kicking a door in for a breach of peace early hours in the morning. See, it's the same kind of tactic they used in what was it, the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act came into play. And I think the Green Brigade won every case they had to take to court, didn't they?
They had cases overturned, and indeed that piece of legislation for the first time in Scottish history and Scottish law was revoked. Such was its misuse. We're going to bring in as many comments as possible. Lowell must go, says Paul. Take away several other non-execs. Lawrence, I'm going to go back to a conversation, discussion, debate, disagreement that you and I had when Peter Lowell came back as a chairman, because you were telling me the definition of a chairman's role at a football club, and I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the definition of a role is at Celtic, because what we have seen and what has been highlighted and focused on this week is that they'll do what they want. They'll make up their own rules. You've got someone with 34.7% off control, but 100% off control. You've got his son wearing a club suit, addressing the AGM before the shareholders are able to ask questions. They will do as they please. So the Peter Lowell question comes up time and time again. He didn't like it at the AGM last year, where I think Joe McHugh asked him a question and he intervened and said this was personal. You've got an issue with me and my family. This is nothing personal. The only thing I take personally is if people are not doing what's in the best interest of Celtic Football Club, Lawrence. And everybody that's in a position, and it could be in a business, it could be in sport, could be in the arts or in music, comes to a point where, to go back to paraphrase Trainspotting, you've got it and then you've lost it, right? And you've had your day and it's time to bow out and it's time to move on. And we bring in a new powerhouse. We bring in someone else with new, fresh ideas. and we bring in a bit of diversity. So this is not personal to Peter Lowell or the Lowell family, but I agree, it is time for Peter Lowell to go.
Listen, I'd agree too. It's time for him to move on. Look, you know, we've had some great success when he's been at the club, you know, in terms of domestic trophies. But I think what we know about Dermot Desmond, getting him to change isn't be, or get him to your point of view, this kind of confrontation, I think he'll just dig his heels in and say no. So if Peter was, you know, it was rumoured that he was going to step down, obviously didn't. I think the confrontation, Dermot's more likely to dig his heels in and say, look, you'll stay until I say you're going. You know, I don't think the tactics just now are going to get Dermot on board. And if you don't get him on board, or, you know, the majority of shareholders on board, you're not going to affect change.
The thing with that, though, in terms of Dermot Desmond, goes back to my original point: how to treat the you know, supposed reactions, right? So it's one of the ones with me. We've learned something from the AGM. I think we already knew it, but it's certainly cast in stone now with regards to what they react to and how they react, Lawrence. So you adapt your approach. You adapt your approach to change. Everybody, I mean, the need for change still exists, but it's how we get there. And it's about how we have a plan and a vision as a fan base to get to that point. I think it's multifaceted. I've said that from day one. At the very first meeting with the signatories of the open letter, there was a fantastic suggestion in and around how you focus on the legalities and the corporate governance of Celtic as a board and how we are run operationally. And I think that to do that, what you need is money. You need legal. You need a legal head to be able to actually look at every scenario and say, we want to challenge X, Y, and Z. So I think that's one of the pronged of a multi-pronged approach for change at Celtic. And the big thing for me as well is it takes the focus away from the football massively. We've got a European game on Thursday night. We've got apparently an incoming manager. We need to...
Listen, this was right before playing St Mirren, who I think have consistently been our hardest domestic tie for the past 3 or 4 years. You know, maybe we've had a harder individual tie, but that's a team that consistently gives us the hardest games. You know, and Carl, what a goal, mate. You know, what a relief. You know, another penalty not given, arguably a red card as well. The Wolves lined up about 6 yards back. You know, VAR not intervening. Are we shocked? You know, but after John Beaton's performance in the game against Libby, yeah, you know, what's left? I think it was Boothroyd's just called him out as it's just cheating at this stage if that's not called for review.
Well, with regards to the officialdom of Scottish football, I think that's something that we will continually discuss. And I think we'll continually discuss VAR until we get one that is actually fit for purpose. And I also think that in order to do that, you need to cost it. And then you need to ensure that you are using your finance, because there's big finance in Scottish football that you can then put into the priority area, which is VAR.
I think that thing Bartlett touched on, you know, Livy assistant said, this is about the guys operating it. You know, it doesn't matter what kind of VAR you had. If you can't see that's a handball that needs to be reviewed by the ref,
the VAR system
doesn't matter what camera you've got.
The VAR system's an etch a sketch.
No,
it's absolute tin.
No, I'm not saying there's not better out there, but if you can't see that's a handball that needs to be reviewed, doesn't matter what camera you've got.
Yeah, but let's be honest though, in terms of doing your job right, you need the right tools, right? And in terms of the officials in Scottish football, no one's going to argue that needs to improve. But the VAR system needs investment. It needs fresh investment. Every single referee in Scotland should be full-time. It should be a full-time occupation. Every single one of them should be making a declaration in terms of support of any team in Scotland. Have they been a season ticket holder at a football club in Scotland? Have they followed a club in Scotland? All these things that are normal in other countries that want to be taken seriously when it comes to football have to be implemented, absolutely. But if we're going to implement VAR, Lawrence, you need to implement a system that works as well as those operating it.
No, without doubt, mate, it's two-pronged. But that, you know, make no mistake, you know, Boothroyd's called him out as a cheat. Marvin Bartlett's more or less said it. You know, if you can't see that needs reviewed by a referee, doesn't matter what system you've got. You know, if you're unwilling to call the ref to the sideline, doesn't matter what system it is. This is down to an individual deciding,
I think it does,
wonder
because
if
there is a
it's-
follow-up, Lawrence. There's a follow-up of proof. There's a follow-up where you can give undeniable proof, and Willie Collum then looks at that with a better system and a better image, and then it's easier to call out those who are making these decisions.
Listen, from the images on that one, what more do you
That's
need?
one example, though, mate. That's
Yeah,
one
no,
example. I'm talking over the board. I'm talking about the images that Michael Stewart called out a couple of weeks ago. There needs to be a system where it's cast iron, and you say to the person that you're employing, how did you get this wrong? Here's the evidence that you got it wrong. Because at the moment, there's a lot of them that's up for debate because we don't have the evidence. The lines are thick, the frame is wrong, etc. I'll take you back to the goal that was scored against Rangers.
Yeah.
Right. So the image that they're using, is not good enough, as well as the VAR operative not being good enough.
100%, mate. But this one, I think, it could be another doogie. Livingston assistant manager saying they've got two different stories as to why it's not been given. As clear as image as you can get, it should be reviewed. There doesn't seem to be any defence that Beaton can give going.
But we're talking about a decision in a game involving Livingston and Rangers. Celtic have got bigger things to discuss right now, Lawrence. That's something that's ongoing, the officialdom of Scottish football, and it's something I'm sure we'll come back to. But I'm not going to waste too much time talking about Livingston versus Rangers. We all know what's going on there. Pete McGee, nothing will improve for the better or the long run until the Desmonds are forced out of Celtic, ramp up the protests. I want to take this on, Pete, because I don't think it's as simple as that. And this is what I mentioned at the very top of the show, Liam. It's all about your approach and the reaction that you get. You ramp up the protests, they will become more vindictive. That is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, you're dealing with someone in Dermot Desmond. You're dealing with somebody who has the money to just run this ad infinitum. He does not need to acknowledge anybody with the money that he's got, right? But his ego is the cause of most of the problems at Celtic, and it's also his biggest weakness. The only thing we can do, and we have to be clever about this, is protests that make him look bad. Hitting him financially isn't going to matter to him, right? And he's shown he's not going to care if people connected to Celtic lose out. Brendan Rodgers was supposedly his mate, and he had no hesitation throwing him under the bus, right?
Yep.
Don't be surprised if in the next week or two he does the same thing to Nicholson or Lowell, right? He might just offer up a sacrificial lamb to draw the pressure away from himself. But Dermot Desmond is the problem. That's the thing. Now, in terms of what do we do next with protests, I'll throw this out there and see what the commenters think, right? I wrote a blog a couple of days ago, and I know, Paul John, you disagreed with this. I don't think I've had your take on it yet, Lawrence, but I suggested expanding the Not Another Penny initiative to target not just Celtic official lines of income, such as merchandise, match day, catering, etc., but also every company that currently has a commercial relationship with Celtic. So all of those companies that are listed in the matchday programme as being patrons of the club, we should do our best to curtail spending on all of them and just tell them it's nothing personal, but you're putting money into that board, and that board are running our club into the ground right now.
No,
to me, that's natural escalation.
I welcome debate and differing opinions. Otherwise, me and Lawrence wouldn't have lasted this long. We've been on this show for what, 6 years, Lawrence?
Yeah,
me 6 years.
Isn't it?
Yeah, we've got 6 seasons.
Yeah, God, 6. Anyway.
And this is what it's all about. But I'll explain my thoughts on that. I think that there are a great number of Celtic supporters who, many of them tradespeople, who are able to build a business up to a point where they've got that opportunity to invest, if you like, in the corporate side of Celtic by sponsoring them. And they build a business up, and a big part of that is maybe their accountant saying to them, look, you're making X amount of profit. It would probably be beneficial if you spent some of that on advertising or sponsorship, because that's how it works. And a lot of them also put it into charitable endeavours. And it's fine. It's not a loophole. It's just a way of managing your income streams. And I think that these Celtic supporters are so proud to see their name on a board and all this kind of stuff, or in the programme, and be someone who's actually supporting the football club in a different way. And it would be very difficult then to say to someone who's maybe built up an electrical firm, for example, I know there's a lot of them in the programme, to say, look, I'm not going to use you. You're actually the football club. is now going to affect your business. I find the effect on people who are on 0-hour contracts in the superstore, the effect on people who have built their business up over 20 or 30 years, who are Celtic supporters through and through, but they've just maybe, taken a ratchet up in terms of the finance, and they're able to actually put more money into the football club. It's unfair on them. And I think there's a great point that Liam makes, which I want your thoughts on, Lawrence, right? Dermot Desmond, the way he thinks, you would need studies into the way that he thinks, the way that his brain works. It's not like you and me. This guy's got a level of control in life and in business that is almost incomprehensible to guys like you and me, right? So it gets to the point where, and it goes roughly back to what I was trying to say earlier, but I think Liam said it better, is how to target them. So you've got the financial element versus the ego element, right? So financially, he doesn't give a hoot. He doesn't give a hoot. And actually, I think that will happen is if there's boycotts, or even if it extends to tickets and season tickets, and a lot of comments are coming in now, both on the show and in the socials, where people are saying, I'm not going back after this season until they change. I honestly don't think he cares. He doesn't care on the financial element. So you've got to target the egotistical element of Dermot Desmond. And I think that's a different approach entirely. I don't know what the approach is, but I agree with Liam. It's a different approach, Lawrence.
Oh, definitely the different approach. I think the end of August, I said, look, it's Adidas we should be targeting, the biggest sponsor, and all Adidas merchandise, and come together and write to them saying, look, we're just not going to buy anything Adidas. Not just the Celtic Adidas merchandise.
Is that an Adidas top you're wearing? Or is it?
No, it's not, mate. I'm boycotting them.
I thought it was a trefoil we had on there.
No, so you could go with that, but I agree with your point. Guys like Sean at Cameron Commercials, he must be over the moon to see his advert. So if you want a band, Sean's your man. Targeting companies like his.
That's going to stick, that, isn't it? Are you getting paid commission? Are you getting paid commission for that advert?
But I said, so guys, as you've said, will be so proud to see their name associated with Celtic, and you don't want to affect them. You've touched on the superstore, whether it's 0-hour contracts or low paying jobs, they're going to be affected before Dermot. So I think confrontation's not the way with Dermot. I think he just digs his heels in, and he'll decide that he's right. You need something a wee bit more persuasive to get him round the table. But it's going to have to be adjusted in what we're doing, because I don't think it's going to bear fruit, the tactics that were employed so far. Wait and see, but I can't see it happening. I can't see Dermot saying, you know what, guys, wakes up tomorrow and go, you know what, I'm wrong, I'm going to sack.
No.
Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay. But
Liam makes a good point about the fact that him and Brendan were like that. They were like that. He's the reason that Brendan was back. Dermot Desmond's the reason for that.
But Brendan was speaking out in the press. I think me and Kev Graham said in the chat group, earlier in the season, is Brendan trying to get himself sacked? Some of the stuff he's saying here, he's calling out everybody.
Maybe he's the only one. Maybe he's the only one that's actually got a set.
But if Peter or Michael or Chris to do that, but to start doing that, I've no doubt they would find themselves on the road the same as Brendan.
We need to speak to them first. Right, let's get some of the comments in. David Gall. So, who's this member of his coaching team coming in that Celtic fans will know about? Liam, have you got any thoughts about this? I read this yesterday in relation to Nancy's coaching team.
I would hope it's Mark Fotheringham, because I think he's done quite well since he came in. Sean Maloney's made it clear he doesn't want to be part of it. He wants to go back to his pathway development job. And from what I hear, he's been doing quite well with that. Martin O'Neill, I think there's a discussion to be had about giving him some sort of job upstairs. Again, another option for the board to maybe try and calm things down a wee bit is make Martin O'Neill, I don't know, honorary life chairman or something. Won't happen, but it's an idea. But I think, if we're talking about someone who knows what it's about at Celtic, I think Fotheringham could be the one, because he's apparently had a very good impression on the people that have worked with him in the few weeks that he's been there already. So,
well, that's a good shout. Good shout. I've seen other names mentioned. I've seen Darren O'Day mentioned he's just lost his job that he didn't have for very long at Swansea, coming back to Celtic. I've seen that one. I can't confirm or deny it. Damien Duff is another one who's had a mention. In relation to this, Lawrence, I don't have an issue with someone who knows Celtic being part of the backroom team. I don't have an issue with it, as long as they're capable of doing their job. But at the same time, I think that if a new manager's coming in, unless you're Ange was quite fine coming in on his own. I mean, he was okay with that, and gradually he brought one or two of his own faces in. It's got, as long as it matches what the manager wants, then I'm okay with that.
Because I think second time round, Lenny didn't get to bring in his team, did he? Yeah.
No.
So I think that probably had an effect on him. Yeah, it's got to be, this, if it is Nancy, he's got a way of working, he works with these guys, and I'm assuming it's Tidsdale that's identified him and decided, yeah, they put a good team in the park. We like the way they play. We can work with that. You'd want to bring them as a group, wouldn't you? I know that was the argument over how the board didn't want to bring all these guys, did they? Then they caved and who went, actually, nah, I'm not bothered now. So I would rather he come in with his own guys and picked his own setup. Somebody that knows Celtic, brilliant. But I think that there's enough guys round about the club that know Celtic. We can teach guys Celtic. Tommy Burns used to teach them that. Take the videos up to them when they'd first move over and teach them all about the club. So that part we can teach them. It's if they can bring in a winning way of football and somebody that can work with a board better or get more out of this board. In recruitment terms, I think we've done really well kind of the past 10 years identifying some cracking players out there that were sold for profit. I don't think perhaps identifying the players was the problem. It's getting the deals done. And unless there's been some kind of reflection on where it's went wrong, they seem to say we realise we made mistakes, but you need to identify who and why we're not getting deals done.
That's the
chairman of another club taking the proverbial out as on TV, perhaps you should be more like Rangers. Listen,
no thanks.
And for the board to kind of say that we're wanting us to put the club at financial risk, we've got 70 million in the bank. We weren't say spend it all.
No.
Push another 10 or 20 out, we could easily have done that. Regardless of obscure tax rules and financial fair play, we could easily have spent that and had a better team in the park and probably qualified for the Champions League. Listen, part of that's in Dermot. I still think the team should have been strong enough to qualify.
Brendan, you mean? Yeah.
Parts on Dermot as well. Why weren't the deals getting done? At what point did you not think I've got to step in and make sure we've got the best players available for the manager? But we should still have qualified. Part of it's in Brendan. And Martin's made him, maybe shown him up a bit. He's been a bit stubborn. Look at some of the players who brought back in from the cold. And Osmond's injured. Look great. Why was he nowhere near the team and we're struggling for strikers?
See, the thing as well, though, Lawrence, the thing with that as well, when you consider the track record, this is what the club does. The club says, but we've had a really good track record with transfers, and I would question that. Yeah, you're going to have some hits, of course you are. I mean, when you buy the amount of players that Celtic buy on a year-to-year basis, you're going to have some hits. It's not about that. I actually don't think we ever had a strategy. Our strategy was buy cheap, sell for big profit. That was the strategy.
I think we look at players at 3 or 4 million. The rumour was when Matt Lowell went, he resigned because he said, look, 3 or 4 million for the level of players you're wanting and the wages you're willing to pay. They're just not out there. You're not going to get Champions League game changers for that.
So what changed in the summer transfer window when we tore that up and we signed 3 players and we spent £26 million?
You're thinking maybe Brendan had a bit more influence then to push that out. And I think Engels has looked a better player under Martin. Trusty's come back in, looked great. Obviously, for whatever reason, I don't think Ada and Brendan got on. He was scoring Champions League, scoring in the Glasgow Derby, and then all of a sudden he's dropped and made as the striker. Kyogo went away. You thought he'd have stepped up here. He's not done anything to lose the jersey. Bang. They're on the bench.
But my concern, I'm going to go back to what you said though, Lawrence. My concern is that people have said, but we've done all right in the transfer. We've not. Because if you want to take Balikwisha and Tunetke as an example, and the other 2 strikers that we were chasing for, I don't know how long, right? Dolberg and Kritzgart, and there's another 18 million quid on top of it.
You're only as good as your last transfer window. Maybe that's what the board need to realise. The last one was an absolute disaster. And unless we unless they're not going to tell us, have a true reflection of where it went wrong. We knew the targets were in by the end of May. Before the cup final, the targets were in. And what did we end up with by the end of August? But we've talked about this before. There should have been a period of reflection after you get out of the Champions League. You hadn't delivered the players in time for that. Right, you've still got a couple of weeks left. What are you going to do? And they still didn't deliver.
Apparently Balakwish and Tuneki were top of the list. Lawrence, you're telling us they were top of the list.
Balakwish was top of the list. I think Tuneki was also on the list. But
right. So is that good recruitment? £10 million on those two?
It's not looking so far just now. Number of games I played. Balakwisha, by all accounts, when Brendan was there, has to leave. So I don't think it on with Brendan. Tunekti, I don't think he knows when he released the ball. Look against St Mirren. The amount of times Callum's pointing to him, put the ball into space, Callum's running into it. Tunekti decides to run with the ball and take the defender with him into that space. And you're going, you're killing the game here. So
recruitment's a shambles. The recruitment's a shambles. As far as I'm concerned, we don't have a strategy. We just had a good run at it because we had some good contacts when it came to agents who were able to recommend certain players. We didn't find them through data-driven recruitment. We didn't have a strategy. We've bought so many players. I mean, that transfer window there, 10 guys have come in. Now you need to have a hit rate that's a lot higher than ours has been for some time, apart from the anomaly of Ange Postecoglou's first season, where we had a different approach and for a spell a different CEO. So we've reverted back to type as far as I'm concerned, where you're going to find one or two nuggets in amongst it, but you're constantly going to get Banguras and Barictas if you are doing recruitment like we are currently doing it. And by the way, we overspent on the two players we've mentioned as well, big time. And that comes down to the guys doing the deal.
Yeah, it comes down to the guys doing the deal. They left it so late to get the deals done. And by that time, you're out of the Champions League. The selling club's looking at you and going, we know you're desperate. And with Sol Kuhn, you'd sold your players before you brought guys in. So the club knows to an extent you've got money, you're desperate, you've been out of the Champions League, they're going to push the price up.
But they're not learning, Lawrence, because we made the mistake with Kuhn and then we made the mistake with Ida. A matter of weeks later. We're not learning from these mistakes.
Absolutely. It was ridiculous, wasn't it? You go down there and sign, no, come back up the road. No, go back down. Jeez.
Meanwhile, the manager's saying, rightly in my opinion, we're not selling our striker until we get a new one in, and he didn't get what he wanted. And then things have unravelled since then. Chill pill, you don't need top quality VAR to see that was a penalty. I get that, but see if you're somebody who is the operator of VAR, and you're thinking the system's really, really junk. So in terms of the evidence and the stills and all this kind of stuff, even the camera frame rate is absolutely tin pot. You're going to take a chance on it because that the evidence isn't going to look as damning as it would if you had a 360 with Champions League kind of quality. That's what we need. If you're going to use it, make sure it's the best. Double denim, if 95% of a room says you are wrong and you still insist you are right, then you are blind to the reality of the situation. Strong leaders recognise and own their weaknesses. Don't know if you're talking about the Celtic board or us three. Right, here we go. We've also got, if you're still living in the fantasy realm, the Celtic FC is still the same thing Brother Walfred and co set up at St Mary's, then sorry, you're in La La Land. We are many miles from that charitable entity. Right, let's talk a wee bit about...
Brendan Sweeney wrote a cracking book about that. The battle for Celtic Coal.
Buy them all. Buy all of Brendan's books.
Oh, those three books, absolutely amazing, aren't they?
Incredible amount of work. They're on the shelf somewhere. Liam, it looks as though Nonce will be the man to come in. And we've said this before. He's one part of a jigsaw. Just one part of a jigsaw. So when it comes to recruitment, and me and Lawrence have just discussed our thoughts on recruitment, that's still broken. That's not been fixed. We've not brought anybody in. We've not made any changes to the structure of our recruitment or our football department. We've merely changed one element of that, and that's the guy that coaches and manages the 11 guys and the subs on a match day. So the way that I look at this is just one element, and if we're going to go into a new era, Liam, we need a much bigger sea change, and a big part of that, of course, is in the boardroom. It's the football department as well, isn't it?
Well, the one encouraging thing about all this is that Nancy has been allowed to bring his backroom team with him. which apparently includes a guy whose sort of specialist area of expertise is analytics, data, and player sourcing. So hopefully that's going to have a positive impact on that side of things. I think that shows a good sense of maybe, just maybe, in the football department, at least, if not the fans, but at least the football department, somebody on the Celtic board is willing to say, right, let's change things up a wee bit here. Because, you know, Brendan Rodgers didn't get that. Brendan Rodgers was given John Kennedy and told to work with him.
Yeah.
Right. So that's already a move in the right direction, allowing Nancy to bring in two of his guys. I'm not sure if it's necessary to pair him up with a quote-unquote Celtic-minded guy like Fotheringham or whoever it may be. But if maybe Nancy himself has requested that because he knows like he doesn't have the local knowledge. So, but I read a thing today which was saying if the timeline that's been laid out this week is accurate in terms of Nancy coming in, he's going to have a cup final, a game against a team that are currently top of the league.
Yep.
And a game against Roma in Europe, which will probably finally settle whether we make it past Christmas or not. Or sorry, whether we make it past the group stage or not in the Europa League. So we could have a cup in the bag, be top of the league, and be through the next round in Europe, or we could be out of all three in the space of a fortnight. I mean, talk about make or break for a new manager.
Huge. The timing.
I would leave Martin in charge, even if it's going to be. Martin's got us winning domestically, you know, and it's make a break for a new manager. You have said Liam, he could come in, lose all 3 games. Where does that put the project? You know?
Yeah.
It is. It's very concerning, the timing of it. And yeah, I can understand the thought process, Lawrence, of keeping Martin O'Neill in charge for some time longer. What do you make, Lawrence, of the fact that Lindsay Train, who are currently the second largest shareholder in Celtic Football Club, have sold 1,636,000 Celtic PLC shares since October this year? Are you reading into that?
They're selling to, you know, because they always vote with Dermot, don't they? And Lindsay Train and Dermot together is more than 50%. If they keep selling, soon it won't be. But it'd be interesting to find out who's buying the shares. I think the share price is as high as it's been for a while, so maybe they're deciding, you know, this is the peak that it's going to be, and we'll cash some of them out.
If that's the case, Lawrence, like what you suggested there, and it's the firm belief of many that Lindsay Train plus Dermot Desmond means you can't vote against us because we'll have 51% of the vote, and whatever we want, we'll get. Right, so that's like a train of thought, and it's understandable that, you know, when you add the two of them up, I think it's just above 50% at the moment. That will be a major concern for Dermot Desmond if it does dip below 50, and then it doesn't even look as though they're in cahoots at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if he's got anyone else with shares that he's maybe given or said, you know, you can have shares as long as you vote with me. I'm sure he wouldn't be doing that to any employees or former employees of the club.
Ah, okay. You'll just leave that one. You throw that one out there. Yeah, absolutely. Simon Fideni, anybody on here going to the Barras Art and Design on Thursday to see the last days of the Martin O'Neill revolution? Right, okay. What's happening on Thursday at Barras Art and Design? Celtic will be playing Feyenoord away from home. It's 5:45 kickoff. Acsom have a fan zone at Bad, big screen, live entertainment from David McKendrick, and free pies. What else could you want? And you can stand shoulder to shoulder with fellow Celtic supporters and hopefully enjoy the night. These are great occasions, and if you want to come along, it's free, absolutely free. But I would suggest that you book a table or book a chair. And what I've done today is I put the link underneath if you wish to come and join us as well. Are you coming along, Lawrence, or are you having a similar event at your bar?
Try and get along. I've got a John McLean thing tonight, so I'm going to go to that. But out twice in a 1 week, it'd be wild.
That's a quiet week for you, mate. Joseph Smout, Ross Desmond has no official role at Celtic. Correct. Even if he was at the AGM as Daddy's proxy, why was the Nepo baby decked out in club gear? See this comment, Liam? This will annoy the Desmonds more. That comment there from Joseph would annoy the Desmonds more than buying merchandise.
Yep. Yeah, it would be an absolute shame if Dermot Desmond got annoyed by somebody repeatedly reminding him that he only owns 34% of the club. that his son is a Nepo baby who has never done a hard day's work in his life and shouldn't have been anywhere near a board meeting. But of course, I wouldn't say anything like that because I'm not that petty.
No, and nobody at Celtic watches Acsom on a daily basis anyway.
No,
Danny
of course
boy,
not.
how you doing, guys? I know nothing, absolutely nothing about Noncy. I'm a cynical old get. Don't be harsh on yourself, Danny. So I'll reserve judgment till I see what he can do. The fear of the unknown, I get it. I absolutely get the fear of the unknown when it comes to a new manager appointment at Celtic. And I think that every single, to quote a cliche, every single appointment is a risk. Of course it is. But if this is part of a wider vision, I think it would be very good on the club to come out. It would be very wise for the club to come out and share that vision. Because if Noncy is part of a wider restructure of the football department, absolutely tell us about it, right? Because I think that would be a positive move. And we will always give credit where credit's due. Lawrence, it's been an absolute pleasure, Big Yin. And maybe you and I should just do a live at your boozer at the Skylark.
Oh,
that would be fun.
Do you know who I'm going to get sponsored?
Who?
You want
Sean
a man? Sean German. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
Jamie O'Hara to come along as well, just for laughs.
I know. Fantastic. You got Guinness on draft yet?
No, not yet. I'm getting a kegerator before I do that, so to keep the keg at constant temperature. So I don't have a
kegerator. Who named it that? Thanks everybody for getting involved. As always, as I say, come and join us on Thursday night. It will be a good one, regardless of the outcome. It's always a good night to spend some time with fellow Celtic fans. And once again, Liam and Lawrence, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.